Morning. Welcome to the first symposium on artificial intelligence and its impact on future communities. From myself and from my co-organizers of the event, we're so happy you're able to join us for what promises to be a very insightful week. As Conrad said, I'm Jeffrey Allan. I'm the director of the Institute for Responsible Technology at Nazareth University in the United States. And before taking this role, directing the Institute, I spent 2 decades in venture capital-backed companies across Silicon Valley and Asia. My time in the tech sector did much to convince me that for the many benefits innovations can offer, a healthy dose of pragmatism and accountability needs to accompany that innovation. As we look ahead, AI's influence on our lives and communities is undeniable. In just the last 2 years, AI has advanced at an unprecedented pace, touching every sector from healthcare to finance. But with this rapid development comes a responsibility to ensure that AI serves the needs of humanity, putting ethical considerations at the forefront of its design. Today, we'll explore both the promise and the challenges of this transformative technology. Before we do that, let's talk about something: breast cancer. Breast cancer is a serious and pervasive disease affecting millions of women worldwide each year. Globally, nearly 2.3 million women are diagnosed with breast cancer annually, making it one of the most common cancers. In the European Union alone, approximately 355,000 women will receive a breast cancer diagnosis this year. It's the most commonly diagnosed cancer in the EU. Sadly, around 90,000 women in the EU this year will lose their lives to this disease. Understanding its progression is vital, as the cancer stage at diagnosis significantly impacts the chances of survival. Breast cancer begins at stage 0, where abnormal cells are present but have not spread. And it progresses through increasingly serious stages until stage 4, where the cancer has metastasized to other parts of the body. As we look at these survival rates, it's clear that the earlier breast cancer is detected, the better the chances of survival. For women diagnosed at stage 0 or stage 1, the 5-year survival rate is close to 100%. This is because the cancer is either non-invasive or localized, allowing for effective treatment. As the cancer progresses to stage 2, the survival rate drops to about 93%. By stage 3, it falls further to approximately 72%. And at stage 4, when the cancer is spread to other parts of the body, the survival rate plummets to just 22%. These numbers starkly illustrate the importance of catching breast cancer early, before it has the chance to advance and become more difficult to treat. When we compare the images at stage 1 and stage 0 and stage 1 side by side, I did bring a little laser pointer here. Stage 0, stage 1. It's clear how challenging early detection can be. In stage 0, the precancerous cells are often so minimal that they're barely visible to the naked eye, even with this type of imaging. This means that cancer at this stage can be incredibly difficult to detect through our routine screenings, the type of screenings that women do annually. As the disease progresses to stage 1, the tumor becomes more defined and starts to invade surrounding tissues. However, this progression can be slow and subtle, sometimes not showing up early on imaging until it's well into stage 1. Considering that many women only undergo breast imaging once a year, it's possible for this transition to occur undetected, meaning that by the time it's visible on a mammogram, the cancer may have already advanced. This underscores the critical need for enhanced detection methods that can catch these changes as early as possible. So in the previous slides, we've explored the stark reality of breast cancer, its stages, the critical importance of early detection, and the challenges inherent to spotting the disease in the earliest forms. We've seen how the progression from stage 1, where abnormal cells are nearly invisible, to stage 0, where they're nearly invisible, to stage 1, where tumors begin to form, can be subtle and slow, often evading even the most diligent screening efforts. Now imagine a tool that can detect these barely visible changes, recognizing the early stages of cancer that even the most experienced doctors might miss. This is where AI steps in, with its transformative potential. The image we just saw is a testament to that promise. I actually want to go back to that. So it's a testament to AI's promise. AI detected breast cancer 4 years before it would have ever been visible to the eye of a doctor. That image on the left, AI could detect that already. So that is a time period of 4 years, advancing from left to right. It's a leap forward that can save countless lives. By catching cancer at its most treatable stage, AI enables earlier, more effective interventions, reducing mortality and improving patient outcomes. AI's ability to sift through vast amounts of data and identify patterns invisible to us showcases its potential to revolutionize healthcare, offering a future where diseases like breast cancer can be detected earlier than ever before. This is just one example of how AI is poised to change the landscape of medicine, offering hope where once there was uncertainty. But AI is not just a tool. It's becoming an integral part of our communities. It's already creating images, videos, and music. It's likely to become a companion in many aspects of our lives. As AI continues to permeate these various aspects of our lives, the tools at our disposal are becoming increasingly versatile and powerful. One example is stable diffusion. Has anyone ever heard of stable diffusion? Good. Which not only creates art, but makes complex decisions that were once solely in the human domain. However, as with any tool, the influence of its creators and users can seep into the final product, sometimes with unintended consequences. One of the most pressing issues we face as AI becomes more ubiquitous is the infiltration of human bias. This bias infiltrates the algorithmic models. AI systems are trained on vast data sets, often pulled from the internet, where biases, both subtle and overt, are baked into this content. These biases can be reflected in the AI's output, perpetuating stereotypes and potentially causing harm. The Bloomberg experiment we're about to explore offers a clear example of this danger. Let's take a look at this slide for a second. What you're looking at here are 60 images. These were created by Stable Diffusion using the prompt, create a color photograph of a CEO. Have we taken it all in? So at first glance, the photorealism is pretty amazing, right? This is from just generated purely from AI, not a real photo in the group. Any one of these could be a real person. But let's take a closer look at these photos. What stands out among these 60 photos? Anyone from the audience? Shout it out.
Male.
Male. What else? Well, that's a good bias I hadn't even thought of yet. But, anything else? How about the tone of the skin? Right? So, what you're really seeing is a reflection of deep-seated biases. This isn't just art. It's a manifestation of the stereotypes that have been ingrained in our culture for centuries. When AI is tasked with creating images based on job titles, what it produces can reveal more about our societal prejudices than we might be comfortable admitting. The above images were created by Bloomberg as part of an experiment to explore how AI handles these scenarios. It analyzed how image generation tools, like the one behind this image, they're not neutral. Instead, they replicate and even amplify the biases present in the data they're trained on. When prompted with job titles such as CEO or teacher, the AI produced images that often reinforced outdated gender and racial stereotypes. As we continue to examine the outputs from this study, you'll see how these biases play out across different professions. Each image serves as a reminder that AI, while innovative and powerful, mirrors the data that it consumes. So that includes all of the flaws and the prejudices within that data. This is an issue we must confront head-on, especially as these tools become more integrated into everyday decision-making processes. For example, when the AI was prompted to create images of a teacher, the results were similarly biased. Just like with the CEO prompt, the AI leaned heavily into societal stereotypes. The majority of the generated images depicted women, often in traditionally feminine attire, reinforcing the outdated notion that teaching is a female-dominated profession. This not only limits our perception of who can be a teacher, but also subtly influences how we value different professions based on gender. These outputs aren't just abstract representations. They can shape real-world expectations and decisions. If AI systems perpetuate these stereotypes, they could reinforce perceived gender norms that affect everything from hiring practices to how young people view their future career options. Let's turn our attention to a different profession, one that starkly contrasts with the previous examples, the role of a janitor, a custodian, a caretaker. The images generated here are likely to elicit a stronger reaction, and that's for good reason. Unlike the relatively subtler biases we saw with the CEO and the teacher, these images lay bare the more insidious and damaging aspects of AI-driven bias. When the AI was prompted with the janitor, the results were overwhelmingly portrayed as people of color, predominantly men, and individuals of a more senior age. This isn't just a case of reinforcing stereotypes, it's a powerful reminder of how deeply ingrained these biases are within our society. The AI didn't just mirror the data, it amplified the prejudices, reducing a diverse group of individuals to a narrow and a very frankly demeaning image. By associating certain jobs with specific races, ethnicities, and ages, AI tools like this one risk entrenching discriminatory practices, both in the digital world and beyond. This slide is meant to shock you, because it highlights a critical flaw in our AI systems. They can perpetuate and even exacerbate societal inequalities. The portrayal of older individuals as janitor further reinforces ageist stereotypes, suggesting that those in lower wage jobs are not just minorities, but also an older demographic, further limiting how society views and values different groups. Looking at our final set of AI images, the prompt was for the role of a fast food worker. The images you see here are equally as troubling as the last set. The racial biases that were present in earlier examples are still glaringly obvious, with heavy racist overtones. When the AI was asked to generate images of fast food workers, the results predominantly depicted people of color, often in stereotypical uniforms associated with low-wage, low-status jobs. The individuals in these images are overwhelmingly portrayed as young men and women of African descent. This isn't just a reflection of societal biases, it's an amplification of the most harmful and damaging stereotypes. What we see here is a direct consequence of AI systems being trained on biased data. The AI didn't just replicate it, it magnified it, presenting a narrow and demeaning portrayal of what a fast food worker looks like. This isn't just an academic concern. These kind of biases have real-world consequences, influencing public perceptions and reinforcing harmful stereotypes. And as with the previous examples, this slide is meant to provoke a strong reaction because it highlights a critical issue. AI systems, if left unchecked, can perpetuate and even worsen existing social inequities. The portrayal of fast food workers as overwhelmingly people of color in these images is not just an oversight, it's a reflection of deeply rooted biases that we must address if we want to create AI that serves everyone fairly and equitably. To go off script here a little bit, before I decided to give this presentation, before I decided to present these slides, I went back to Stable Diffusion. And I wanted to see, because this was done about a year ago, so I wanted to see, had they fixed this? Was this still present in their system after this very widely published Bloomberg experiment? So I went in and I put each of these prompts back into the system, and guess what? It wasn't fixed. It was there. Despite our knowing it was there. So how seriously is Silicon Valley taking this issue? Not very. Oops. Let's see here. Sweet. We've run into a technical hiccup there. There we go. Thank you. So, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture of what we've seen so far. This graph represents the gender breakdown of all the images generated by AI across professions. What stands out immediately is the overwhelming bias toward portraying certain genders in specific roles. And hopefully, I mean, that might not be very visible from, particularly if you're way back there in the audience, but what stands out immediately is this overwhelming bias about genders. And for instance, roles like CEO and janitor are predominantly depicted as male, while teaching roles are overwhelmingly female. Maybe if we can kind of point out a few things here. So here we have architect, lawyer, politician, doctor, CEO, judge, engineer along the top. We may consider high prestige, high paying occupations. Man, women, ambiguous. We can kind of see the breakdown right there. This is definitely not like a one-off. This is not like it's a fluke within the AI's model. Down here are low-paying occupations: janitor, dishwasher, fast food worker, cashier, teacher, social worker, housekeeper. We can definitely see a bias. There's a pattern. This visualization starkly illustrates the extent of gender bias within these AI systems. It's not just a few isolated images. It's a consistent pattern across different professions. These biases, when repeated across numerous AI-generated outputs, can reinforce traditional gender roles and limit how we perceive people in the workforce. If we allow these biases to persist, unchecked, they risk becoming self-perpetuating, influencing not only public perception, but also potentially impacting hiring practices and professional opportunities. The data here forces us to confront the reality that AI, while powerful, is far from neutral. It reflects and amplifies the gender biases present in the data it was trained on. And as these technologies become more widespread, so too does their influence on our social and professional landscapes. In building on the insights from the gender breakdown, let's examine how these biases extend across racial lines. So this graph, like the earlier one, shows the racial distribution of the images generated by AI across various professions, and the professions are the same as the earlier slide. Just as we saw with gender, there's a clear bias here, with people of color disproportionately represented in roles like janitors and fast food workers, while white individuals are commonly depicted in high-status roles, such as CEOs. What's crucial to understand is that these racial biases are not just reflective of existing inequalities, they risk reinforcing and deepening them. As we close this segment, it's clear that AI, when left unchecked, can perpetuate harmful stereotypes across both gender and race. These aren't just abstract concerns, they have real-world implications, influencing public perceptions and potentially exacerbating social and economic disparity. As we move forward in this discussion, the need for responsible AI development becomes even more pressing. We must ensure that as AI continues to evolve, it does so in a way that promotes fairness and equity, rather than reinforcing the biases of the past. While AI offers great promise, it also comes with significant risks, especially when it perpetuates human biases. As we saw in the previous slides, even as something as seemingly straightforward as image generation, biases and stereotypes can creep in. But imagine if these biases were embedded in more critical systems like financial services or healthcare. It's essential that we proactively address these issues now, safeguarding our future communities against the dangers of biased AI. Unfortunately, the tech industry often prioritizes rapid innovation over ethical considerations. Have we all heard the expression, move quickly and break things, move fast and break things? It's kind of the mantra of Silicon Valley. I've lived that life, and it is really true and it really exists, and that's how the industry is dominated. We've seen headlines about big tech companies laying off responsible AI teams, and that raises concerns about their commitment to ethical AI development. I'm not sure how many of you paid attention earlier in 2023 to early 2024 when layoffs happened across companies like Google, Microsoft, other large tech companies. Some of the first layoffs that happened were the ethical AI teams, which was very alarming because they do a very good job of paying lip service to ethics and responsibility, but when push comes to shove and it's time to cut costs, who goes? The people who are doing that. The strive to innovate at any cost can be dangerous when it comes to something as powerful and as far-reaching as AI. It's crucial that we recognize and address these gaps before they lead to more significant societal harm. Now, despite these challenges, there are specialized institutes dedicated to tackling the ethical implications of AI. Institutes like my own, the Institute for Responsible Technology, the Institute for Responsible AI, or the Responsible AI Institute, RAI, and Adobe's Content Authentication Initiative are at the forefront of this effort. These organizations, along with our university partners here, are at the forefront of this effort. These organizations are crucial in ensuring that AI is developed responsibly. But to truly safeguard our future communities, we need more initiatives and stronger partnerships between these institutes, policymakers, and the private sector. Conferences like this one play a critical role in addressing the issues we face as AI becomes more integrated into our communities. This week, we'll be tackling some of the most pressing challenges in AI development, from ethical considerations to policy frameworks. What we do here will set the stage for shaping the global view on how AI can become a responsible and effective part of our lives. This is just the beginning, and our discussions here will have lasting impacts on the future of AI. As we close, I want to leave you with a call to action. We must all take an active role in shaping AI's future, not just from a technical perspective, but with a focus on greater good for humanity. This conference is not the end of this discussion, it's just the starting point. Together, with our international partners, we have the opportunity to set AI on the right path, one that serves our communities to the fullest responsibly, and ethically. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you all a very productive and insightful time at the conference.
All right, thank you very much for a wonderful keynote speech. And thank you very much for every one of you for listening carefully. I believe there's so many similarities of thoughts rushing around in our minds. So we'll ask our 2 students' assistants to take the microphones, and we will pick up questions from the audience. So if you have a question, or if you have a similar thinking, or if you have an experience, please share, please ask. Let's discuss for a little while. We have about 20 minutes for this, so let's not lose this 20 minutes because our flights were really expensive here. Okay? Just raise up your hand. But these microphones are the ones that we can throw to anyone. So if it comes to you, just ask the question. Yes, Parish.
Okay, hello. Maria Laurea from the Ministry of Transport and Communications. I open with an easy question. So the EU has kind of set the bar with the GDPR on privacy, and now it has implemented or started implementing the AI Act, which is the first regulatory framework for responsible AI. How do you see the landscape in US? Do you see that we are, after this kind of free and wild Western style start, getting to a more governed or more responsible way of how these technologies will be used in the future? So is there some regulations or court decisions to be expected?
Thank you, and I don't want to give away too much of my day 3 talk. So I encourage you to come to my policy talk on Wednesday. However, that is a very good question, and it's one that I think about a lot because the EU has really set the stage now with its foray into the regulatory side of artificial intelligence. And I think it's a good first effort by the EU. In the US side, as always, things tend to be more complicated, and we have to think about it from the point of view of both the federal side as well as the state side of the regulatory landscape. To our end, Biden's executive order has been our first real sort of effort towards creating a path forward to how AI is developed. And it is fairly broad and fairly, I would say, fairly loose in its way that it's tried to guide AI development, as well as not really having any type of enforcement mechanisms or anything to that nature. So one of the things that I perceived has been that AI regulation, as with many types of technology regulation, is a difficult area to find a nice balance where you're not over-regulating and stymieing innovation, but at the same time, we want to have some common sense guidelines that really address the public good. We're not there yet. I think we are getting there. I do think we can take the EU's lead as an example, and to see how the regulatory framework kind of fleshes out here and how it affects the industry over here. So I'm really interested to see that myself, and then to see what that we can take away in terms of best practices. I do think that we are ahead of other parts of the world which really haven't kind of taken any steps at this point. And that's another thing we really do need to think about. It's a real concern that we have certain actors on the world stage who don't really put a priority on responsible technology and artificial intelligence. They are more concerned with getting an edge up for their particular nations. And we have to kind of think about, as we move forward and we take these responsible actions, what about the actors who are not going to be compliant and not going to join the larger international community in taking those types of actions and efforts? So that's just kind of my broad thoughts on regulatory and what I've seen so far.
Hi Jeff, thank you very much for a wonderful keynote to start with. You have covered both opportunities and challenges. You mentioned about the challenges, so what about responsible use of AI? And before the use, how about developing responsible AI? That's what I think you addressed. How do you see and how much time it will take us to reach there?
Let me pull up my crystal ball here, but no, I think we're talking about this now. We're talking about it before it's a problem, and that's a great thing, because a lot of the time we don't make that effort. We don't have that sense of the need to do so. So we look at, one of the things we've talked about in the last several years has been the harm that social media has potentially caused on the youth of the world. Unfortunately, we're talking about it a good 10 years after the fact. And the fact that we're here now today talking about responsible AI and the potential dangers of uncharted AI is a very positive indicator to me. And I think we do have the opportunity to make change now. We have the opportunity to do it before it's a real problem. And I think there's a good sense in this room that AI really is a fundamental change to the way we do things. It's that important. I've heard it compared to the advent of the internet. Personally, I think it's a lot more powerful than that. So we really do need to get in front of it. And it is happening very, very quickly. Maybe about 2 years ago, if you had asked me where we would be when AI would be at the point it's at today, I would have said 5 years from now. So the rapid development and the rapid acceleration of innovation within the space makes it even more important that we do get in front of it, that we do take the opportunity to think through the potential issues we may encounter before they are really issues. So I think we're on the right track, at least for this little small group here, but still a lot of work to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If I may. Yeah, thank you so much for your insightful speech, Mr. Allan. I'm a Laurea representative, not an expert in the area of AI at all. I got extremely fascinated by the photos for the professions that you have generated, or this AI tool have generated. I just started wondering that as Finland is a predominantly white society, let's say, so at the time when you consulted this stable diffusion tool, you are located in the States, right? Does that play a role when you conduct such a search? Because if I would do the same in Finland, being locally networked, etc., would that affect the outcome somehow?
It's certainly an interesting question, and I think if we trained it only on data from Finland, you might find something different. One of the things I've noticed, and it certainly I know Dr. Porter, who's sitting in the front here, and I have talked about this a little bit, and it has been about, there's a certain ethnocentrism built into the development of AI. So if AI is developed in the United States, which of course most of it is out of Silicon Valley, you're going to get a certain point of view. I've thought about many of the facets of how this manifests. And without getting into future talks here, I have to save some of my material for future books. But ultimately, as long as it's centered in one place as it is, you're going to get a certain point of view. And then I think when you're training on a broader data set, we're going to have to look at historic precedent to see what the ultimate potential biases are within the data. And if we have a largely Western European and North American dominated view of society, that is what the AI is going to reflect. When I first heard these Bloomberg results, it was in a talk I was actually sitting in as a participant. And I asked the question to the speaker, I said, is this AI being biased, or is this just a reflection of us as a society? Maybe it's both, probably is both. But we have to really think about that, and it's something that we need to probably proactively address. And that comes with its own challenges, because companies like Google have made efforts. I don't know who here has seen it, but Google made an effort to tighten up this type of bias within their models. And what resulted was when they asked for the founding fathers of America, a picture generated of that, it generated a very diverse, very ethnically diverse group, which we obviously know is not historically accurate. So there's that balance between, balancing accuracy with also not embedding bias. It's a very difficult thing, but it's something that we have the opportunity to think about now and address early on, and it's something we must do for the future.
Yes, thank you. My name is Laurea. I'm from the Netherlands, and I have a difficult question. How to talk to matter. I really believe in guidance of AI, but do you think that we should start teaching people to take their own responsibility? Because I think we are giving the data to AI, and we have to use it in a responsible way. So we can trying to guide AI, but I don't believe it's really helpful if all of us is giving all kind of data.
I think to that end, and so I recently had a book come out, and one of the chapters in the book that I included was how to spot problematic data in AI results. One of the things, if you're around the university scene very much, you've probably all heard the fear of faculty and the use of AI by students. Students aren't going to learn to think critically. I think that sentiment is only accurate to a certain degree. They're not going to learn to think critically in the way that we expect them to, we traditionally have, which is to sit down and write papers and take tests to show us that they're ingesting and they're internalizing knowledge. However, I always counter that by saying one of the things that AI can have the best opportunity to do is to teach them to question critically, to start to question things, whether or not this is accurate. And we know in the world of misinformation today that a lot of people aren't capable of questioning critically. But AI does have that opportunity, and I think to your point, that's a very good observation. We should be teaching users to think, okay, this is what AI turned out in terms of results. Is something wrong with this? Where are the weaknesses here? Where are the biases present in this? And to start thinking like that as they're looking at results so that they can use AI better, so that they can become more skilled at working with it. And that's probably one of the things that we really need to focus on with students. And it's what I've tried to do with my own students as I've encouraged them to take advantage of the power that AI offers. I also want them to become critical consumers of the systems. I want them to understand what AI is good at, where its weaknesses are, how to identify those, and then how to improve those. And the more we start to get into that mindset, probably the better off we'll be, as well as we start to deal with more and more AI within our daily lives.
Okay, my name is Paulinus from Laurea. I have a couple of questions actually, but I would like to ask just few of them, just two, so I can leave the floor for us to ask as well. So the first question I would like to ask is, it borders on the recent call by some AI experts on AI actors slowing down on the AI solutions that they deliver. And the reason being that there seems to be the pace of regulation is very slow, which means that many AI solutions are not within the framework of some basic regulations that we're supposed to have. So I would like to know, in your view, do you think these AI actors are actually hearing this call, or are they working in tandem with governments towards seeing to a framework that will guide the development and the deployment of these AI solutions? The second question has to do with the issue of bias. So when you talk about the bias, I want to ask you your view. For example, someone who is deploying AI knows that there is a bias in a solution, but he intends to deploy that solution, even with the bias. So how do we deal with such a scenario where we know that there is rather an agenda rather than the equity and inclusiveness that we talk about? in deployment of the solutions? Thank you.
Two very good questions, also very difficult to answer, but I will try my best. I think for the first one, in terms of working together, the way I think about this is that there's a certain amount of interaction going on between private sector and policymakers in terms of AI and following best practices, frameworks, and so on that would ultimately be good for everyone. The thing that bothers me about that is, as I look at the rosters of people who are meeting with, at least I've seen from the American side, it's a very focused, small, elite group. And I've had this talk with industry associations before where I say that this group, this relatively handful of people, are the ones who are deciding what our interests are. We're not playing a very big role as a larger society, as industries, outside of the tech sector, outside of the tech elite. We're playing a very minimal, if non-existent role in how AI policy should be developed, what best practices should be, and what the interests of the common good are. And I don't think that's being done very well right now. And the unfortunate thing is, as we know with policies, once a policy is made, I used to work many years ago. I used to work in the lobbying side of things. And I once had a government official tell me that it's really easy to pass a regulation. Once it's there, good luck getting rid of it. And that's the reality that once these regulations do start to fall into place, they are going to be what they are, and it will be very difficult to walk them back. And so I do feel we have to play a larger role, and that comes for the private sector. If you're in a sector that's outside of the technology industry, you have certain interests that have to be represented. You have to have a voice within the development, as we do as private individuals too. And this needs to, our elected representatives need to be aware that we have opinions on this and we want to see certain things happen. So we have to make our voices known. And I don't think we're doing that yet. On the latter part, I'm sorry, can you remind me on the second question again?
Yes, the second question I asked was, knowing that there is a bias, of course, and you have an agenda, or you want to push your solutions forward to save your agenda, how do you deal with that?
Right, okay. And so, yeah, that's what I thought of right away. I thought late stage capitalism. But the reality is, when you are an employee of one of these big tech giants and you have a mandate, you have a job to do, you have to balance doing the best you can without the proper training for what is biased and what is ethical and what is responsible, and getting the product out the door, because if not, you're risking your job and your livelihood, right? So there's always this conflict, right? And I do feel it's somewhat unfair that we ask software developers, engineers, UX designers to decide what's ethical and what's responsible. Very little conversation, at least from my knowledge, happens within these organizations outside the realm of a small group of ethicists who say, we should do this or that, and then either that information is completely disregarded or, hey, thanks for your input. And then they go ahead and they design it in a way that they feel is going to give them an edge over their competition. I feel as if that's a secondary concern for them. And I may be jaded a little bit about it, but I've seen it firsthand time and time again. As long as I spent in Silicon Valley, I've seen very little concern for thinking about good and ethical and responsible compared to getting more funding, making more revenue, getting more customers, reducing churn, things of that nature. It's much more the business questions, the financial, the commercial questions, rather than the ethical and societal. I think we're just about out of time, right?
Yes, we can take one last question. So we're allowed to go a little bit. Okay. Yes.
So thank you. My name is Walter Meyerhofer, and I'm from Vienna, Austria. One question I had was, and it ties in with what you just mentioned, what do you think is the role AI will have on the financial industry and commerce in general. Financial industry, we know AI can manipulate public opinion, so it's probably very easy to manipulate financial markets. And on the commercial side, the use of AI for price gouging, finding an individual price point for each of us and raising prices, which is, in my opinion, price discrimination. Where do you think we are going there?
I think there's a very real possibility that it could go that way unless there is some regulatory frameworks put in place to prevent it. And that is often going to be a tough sell, only because you're going to meet lobbying resistance from organizations that want to employ tactics like that. The last company I led before I left Silicon Valley was actually a AI fintech. And what we discovered, it's funny because I said that conversations about ethics happen very, very rarely. I can tell you one of the questions that we had. So I led a company called Echo Ridge, which was affiliated with Dartmouth College as well as some other larger institutions. Echo Ridge had the capability to ingest every single piece of legislative data from the United States at the state and the federal level, which was just hundreds of thousands of pieces of pending legislation. And we could tell you with a greater than 90-degree accuracy whether or not that legislation would pass or fail. And that was a very powerful tool, one that gave me some concern, especially in the climate of the United States in 2016. So I sat down with my board of directors and my investors, and I said, we can tell you what's going to happen legislatively. I can tell you how to tank a piece of legislation. I can tell you how to get it passed. I can tell you who needs to sponsor it. I can tell you the calendar date it needs to be introduced to make it happen. That's a very powerful thing in the world of politics. And I very much do not want to unleash that on the American public. So my board of directors and my investors were very unhappy with me at the time. But we decided not to release it in its current form just because of those capabilities. However, one thing we did realize was this, that one event affects another event. And what we did realize was that legislation that happened was going to affect financial markets. And so 3 degrees removed from that, we realized we could predict stock prices based on public policy. And so that capability is quite real, and it exists. It existed 8 years ago when we were doing this. So it's only going to become more powerful than it was then. And we were already very, very good at what we did. Hedge funds were our clients. And so we could tell you exactly what was going to go up in price because 6 months ago, the California legislature passed a bill that enabled online gaming so you could buy lottery tickets through your phone. We could tell you right away what companies were going to go up in stock price because of that. We could tell you what the price of gold was going to be because of certain economic and legislative factors. And if we could do that then, imagine where we're going now as it becomes more and more powerful. So it definitely exists, and it's definitely better than it was when I was doing it. But without any type of regulatory framework, without any type of guidance on how these capabilities and these powerful tools like this can be used, you're going to find companies and organizations that are going to use it in a way that we would find disagreeable, unethical. And so that's why it's important that we sort of grapple with the capabilities that are out there now and think about the potential for misuse and how we guide that.
So, thank you very much, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
The symposium has now started, right? So, in our next, thank you very much for your help. In our next session,